Hello and happy Friday to all of you in the Comms Club. Now, day 3 of the March Matters videos. So the goal is we embrace spring, we embrace the opportunity to up-level our communication skills, to make sure that we have techniques and skills that we can use to connect and really feel confident and clear in our communication. So we're also going to do an experiment. These daffs were bought on the 1st of March. Let's see how long they stay in bloom for. So Friday wisdom. Today is all about time. So my question is, have you got time to communicate well? And I suppose it builds on, as all of these videos will, they will build on the ones that have gone before. But this is a concept that I don't know, I feel quite strongly about because of the pace of today's society. So in a world where we are supposed to be available 24/7, we can receive information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can be contactable. The vast majority of us are contactable 24/7. People can track where we are, what we're doing, and we lay our lives and our souls bare on social media channels, and often a number of those. It creates this impression that there is vast amounts of time in our lives, but we seem to never have enough of it. And when it comes to communication, I kind of want the opportunity to just get you to reconsider the priority that you put on time when it comes to your communication. So let's just think about this. Now, I want you to be confident and clear and feel comfortable in all sorts of important conversations. And the way in which we communicate in these important conversations is done in many ways. It's done through our words. It's done through the tone of voice that we use to say those words. It's done through our facial expressions, our body language, our intention. And it's also done through our environment and our presence in these important conversations. So lots of things affect the impact that we can have, and it's our presence that is often, it's kind of the unspoken experience that we have. You can probably think of a moment when you've had a conversation with someone, and despite you sitting there excuse me, sitting there looking them in the eye, you don't actually feel like they're with you in that conversation or even with you in the room. And there are probably moments where you didn't think someone was listening to you, but when they play back what they just heard, it's clear that they were really present in the conversation that you had. Hold the line, please, caller. Oh, it's so annoying, isn't it? I have a little residual tickly throat from my skiing holiday and a cold that I picked up there, and it bothers me to the nth degree. Anyway, being present is really, really important. Sometimes you feel that people aren't present in a conversation you're having, and sometimes people surprise you with their presence. And I suppose when we're thinking about having impact in the important conversations, I want you to remember, or maybe know for the first time, that what is at the centre of everybody's universe is themselves. So you're talking to somebody about something that is really important to you, because you are the most important thing in your world. You need to survive, you need to thrive, you need to be protected from harm, and you need to connect and belong. However, the person that you're speaking to is the most important thing at the centre of their universe, and therefore everything that you say to them will be filtered. It will be filtered by them through 2 lenses. Is this relevant, and is this important to me? And therefore, sometimes people will remember everything you've said because it ticked both of those boxes. And sometimes you can be conveying something that's really relevant, really important, and really interesting to you. But unless it ticks those boxes for the person you're speaking to, it's unlikely to be remembered. And sometimes you're not even likely for them to understand you. So therefore, when you know that the person that you're speaking to in this important conversation is the most important thing at the centre of their universe, you get the opportunity to communicate in a way that you can show that what is important to them is important to you. And I first heard the phrase that I'm about to share with you from a training that I did with Phil Jones, who is an incredible public speaker and communication coach. And Phil said that for you to create great rapport with people, you need to demonstrate that you care about the things that the people you care about care about. So you need to show that you care about the things that the people you care about care about. So if it's important to them, it needs to be important to you. And that is the best opportunity that you can take to create connection in a conversation, is when you take yourself out of the center of your universe, and for the purpose of this conversation, you put somebody else and their needs and their wiring and their perspective and their desires and their interests at the heart of your universe. And when you approach an important conversation with them at the center of your world, they can feel it, they sense it, they know it from the words and the tone that you're using and your commitment to the conversation, your eye contact, your body language, your facial expressions, where you've chosen to have the conversation, and the fact that you've even given it time. Because what is the most precious commodity that each of us has that we can gift somebody else? It's our time. That is the one thing we can never claim back. And therefore, if you have a conversation with someone, you give time to someone to understand something they want to talk about, hear about something that's bothering them, invest your time in helping them to overcome a problem, be better at something, you are gifting them with time. And what that does, when you are present in a conversation and you allow it and give it the time it deserves, you are inadvertently saying to that person, of all the things that I could be doing with my time right now, I'm having this conversation with you. And that is because you are important to me. You are just as important to me as you are important to yourself. I care about the things you care about because I care about you. And therefore, sometimes we fall foul of some communication traps because we want to have an important conversation, but we don't allow it or think about giving it the amount of time it deserves. So, my top tips in making the sharing of your time really impactful in your conversations are a few things. Top tips. The first one is when you are having an important conversation, whether you started it or someone else started it on your behalf, stop. Stop what else you are doing. Give your conversation the focus and time it deserves. For the time that you are in this important conversation, make sure that you take the opportunity to put the person at the center of your universe and make sure that you care about nothing more in that moment than the connection and the exchange that is happening between the two of you. So stop, focus, and be present and gift the person that you're talking to your undivided attention and your time. It is incredible what happens when you consciously do this. I talked in one of the previous videos about actually communicating with intention rather than out of habit. And when you communicate with people with the intention of just being totally present, then the most magnificent things happen. The response you get, the connection you build, the reactions you get, the relationship that you form, so much stronger than when you didn't gift your time wholeheartedly for that conversation. And don't get me wrong, not every conversation needs to be one that you drop everything and you make unfaltering eye contact and absorb yourself into totally. So lots of conversations happen as we're multitasking, going about our business. I'm referring to the ones that matter. And if you know me by being part of this group, you'll know that parenting is one of my passions. I don't think I've got it nailed, but I consciously parent my kids in a way to create the strongest of connections with them and build in them self-esteem, self-worth and self-confidence so that they can build those connections as they grow up and enter adult life. And what I've learned is, you know, if something is really important to a child, to the parent, to the adult, often it's mindless rubbish, or it's a tiny thing, and we have this habit sometimes of believing we don't have time to talk about that, and we brush the kids off. Incredible things happen when in the moment, when that child is having a conversation with you and they're telling you about something that happened in their day. To you, it might be a small thing in comparison to everything else that you've got going on in your world. But to them, it's a really big thing. And it might have been something that they did at school that day. It might have been somebody that upset them and hurt their feelings in the playground. It might be a question that they're desperate to know the answer to. It might be something that they want to ask you about what's happening next, or what's, you know, the 800th question in a row that they've asked you. You know, when our children grow up, we want them to come to us with the big stuff. The thing to realise is that in their world, when they're small, everything is a big thing. And when you adopt this approach of giving them your undivided attention in the important moments when you communicate with them, then actually you probably don't need to invest more than 10, 15 seconds. But in those 10 or 15 seconds, they felt heard, they felt safe, they felt understood, and they were able to process your reply, your response, your answer in such a way that it allows them to move on. Because they only shared it with you because in their world it was important. So sometimes focusing and giving your time and gifting your time to people, it doesn't have to be a marathon. But in the moment, if the conversation or the relationship is important to you, give them your priority. So stop and focus on the conversation. The other thing that I would ask you to consider is, have you got time to start the conversation? So have you got time? Is now the right time? Because if it's an important conversation, sometimes it can be a challenging conversation, and you can think to yourself, oh, actually, right, my husband's just come in from work. I want to talk to him about this issue. But if in the back of your mind you think, right, well, actually, I need to go out to basketball club in 20 minutes. If you cannot be sure that you've got time to start and finish that important conversation within that 20-minute window, I would encourage you not to start it. So have you got time to finish what you've started? Is the first question. The second question to ask yourself is this a good time for the other person to have this conversation? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes when it's an important conversation, we rile ourselves up, we get prepared to have it, and then it kind of bubbles and it gets closer to the surface, and then the minute we lay eyes on the person we need to have this conversation with, we launch. And actually, if that person that you're speaking to has just had a tiring day, or they've just, you know, their nerves are frayed, or they've just had some sort of stressful experience, is it the right time for them to wholeheartedly take part in this conversation? If the conversation you're going to have is important to you, make sure that you investigate whether it's a good time for the other person to talk about it. And for those of us in the group who are married or in long-term relationships, you will probably have worked out that there are certain times, I know for me, for sure, there are certain times when I should avoid bringing up a deep and meaningful chat with my husband. He's in the fire brigade, and at the end of a long shift pattern, he is not in the right frame of mind. He's not got the emotional, mental bandwidth to actually have me launch into a deep and meaningful conversation about the future opportunities for our kids. He needs me to bring that sort of stuff up when he's in a far more relaxed mood. So if you're not sure whether someone has got the time to chat about a topic that you want to bring up that's important to you, ask them. Don't just start a conversation, because sometimes it needs time to run through to a conclusion. And if you cut it short because you run out of time, it's very hard to circle back to it later that day or the next day and pick up where you left off. Because what's happened from the first half of the conversation finishing to the start of the second half of that conversation, there might have been hours, if not days, where people have reflected. And if you remember in yesterday's video, I talked about a conspiracy theory. It's where you have pieces of factually correct information and gaps in between. And you start to fill the gaps with a story that you tell yourself, which is often wrong. If you half finish a conversation, by the time you come back to continue it, somebody will have joined up those pieces of factual information you shared, and they would have created a story, and they'd be telling themselves something that there's a good chance it's not true. So make sure you've got time to finish a conversation before you start it, and also check that the other person has got time to finish it. And don't hesitate. If someone starts a conversation with you and you know you've got a commitment, be bold and clear, because clear is kind, in saying to them, do you know what, before we talk about this in any detail, I want to be able to make sure we've got time to chat it through thoroughly, but in 15 minutes from now, I'm expecting a FedEx delivery, or I've got an appointment, a client call in 30 minutes, and I don't want that to cut us short. So can I just stop you there and let's agree a time to have this whole conversation? Literally just, it's respectful to literally just be honest with someone and say, look, I know what that we need to talk about this, but I really want to be able to give it my full attention, and I can't do that right now because ... So how about we talk about this later, or at this time? And sometimes emotions can be frayed, and it's respectful to say to someone, look, I sense that this is going to be a conversation that we need to have in the right place. Having it while we're, in this coffee shop, that might not be great. I can tell that, you're already emotional. I want to make sure that we pick the right environment. Can I just suggest we talk about this later, when we're back at home, when we are, you've probably given, your kids the mum stare that says, I clocked what you just did. Don't think I am going to bring it up now, but when we get home, we will be talking about this. And therefore, there's nothing wrong in suspending the conversation, but try and suspend it before you get too far into it, because then the conspiracy theory stories start to feed in. And therefore, the last point I would like to make about time is, if you are trying to be present and demonstrate that the person you're speaking to is at the centre of your universe for the duration of that conversation, because what they care about, you care about, because you care about them, then the biggest trap that you could fall into, and I would encourage you to avoid, is checking your phone or your watch to see what time it is, unless you have been crystal clear that you do that beforehand. Because without creating that boundary for the conversation, if you get 3/4 of the way through and then you are actively glancing at your wrist or touching your phone so that the light comes on so you can see what time it is, it says, non-verbally, it says to the person you're talking to, not fully present with you anymore, just check in, see what the time is, because maybe I can go and do something more interesting instead, or see what else is going on, or how quickly can I get out of here. It is far more respectful and polite and effective to say to someone, right, I am all yours until 2 o'clock. So what I've got one eye on the kitchen clock, and every now and again I'm going to glance at it just to make sure that we end this conversation in a really good place. That is everything I want to share with you about time for communication. I'd love to know your thoughts, and I will see you back in this page on Monday for video number 4. Okay, bye for now.